The most commonly used way for getting user input is the scanf function, and that's one of the things we'll be looking at in this video. You'll better understand some of the parts of the scanf function if you watch the video about the printf function first. Suppose I want to send Homer a letter. I've got the letter stamped and ready to send, but I'm missing one vital piece of information: Homer's address. Keep this thought in mind as we look at the scanf function. Here's the basic form for the scanf function. You start with the function name, followed by a format string, followed by an address to send the input data to. The idea of an address is just like what we'd need to send somebody a letter. Do people still send letters, I wonder? Well, maybe not, but I'm sticking with that analogy anyway. The format string is very much like that used in the printf function. The placeholders for ints, floats, and chars are the same in both functions. So here's an example. I'll define an integer named x, then I'll prompt the user for the value for x. The scanf statement would look like this. The format string is showing that we're getting keyboard input for an integer, and the ampersand x means store this value at x's address. Let's define some variables: a float, a character, and a double. Here's a picture of what they would look like in memory. Then we'll ask the user for a character value and let them type in a value using scanf. This scanf function says we're getting character input from the keyboard and storing it at the address of the ch variable. So when the user types the value and presses enter, the computer goes to the address of ch and stores the input. For example, if the user entered an uppercase B, it would get stored into the variable's memory space, just like this. Then we'll ask the user for a float and let them type in their value. This scanf says we're getting float input from the keyboard and storing it at the address of our float variable. So the computer goes to the address of the fn1 variable and stores the input. In this example, let's say the user entered -12.08 and then pressed enter. The input would get stored into the variable's memory space. Finally, let's ask the user for a double. This scanf says that we're getting double input from the keyboard and storing it at the address of our dn2 variable. The computer goes to the address of dn2 and stores the user's value. Now, be careful with doubles when you're using scanf. The placeholder must be %lf. That's a lowercase l, not a 1. If you leave off the L, you're not going to like the results. Like the printf function, the scanf function has a lot of options, some of which can get pretty complex. For our class, if you use scanf the way I've shown you in this video, you're going to be fine. Now you may have noticed I haven't said anything about string input yet. The additional reading explains why we won't be using scanf to get the user's string input. So make sure you understand why we need an alternative method of doing things. And for us, that alternative method is the fgets function. Here are the parts to know. It starts with the function name, fgets. Then comes the string where you want the input to be stored. This is followed by the maximum number of characters the user is going to be allowed to enter. And finally, we need a source of the input. In other words, where are these characters coming from? It might be better to illustrate this with an example. So first we define a string. We're naming this one state, and we're telling the compiler that this string can hold as many as 30 characters. Then we'll prompt the user for their entry. Then we'll write the fgets statement. Notice that the first argument inside the parentheses is the variable name, which is state in this case. Next, we limit the user to 30 characters. Even if they want to, they can't go past 30 when typing in their entry. And the last argument is the word standard in, which is the source of the input. Now you got to remember, standard N is another name for the keyboard in our course. And as explained in the reading, we remove the \n from the string. When we study strings in more detail, we'll revisit using fgets and removing the \n. At this point, the main thing you need is practice. I'll be giving you some practice problems, but please make up some of your own. Every program we are going to write will be getting input and producing output. Mainly, have fun, and thank you for watching this.